America is terribly divided right now. In fact, the New York Times had a piece by Timothy Williams, I believe it was yesterday, yesterday, titled, "With Most States Under One Party's Control, America Grows More Divided." And it turns out that basically every single state, with one single exception, is controlled by a Republican governor, a Republican House or Assembly, and a Republican Senate, or by a Democratic governor, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate. That would be the case with California, the Democrats. It would be the case of Louisiana, for example, the Republicans. And they're moving in these radically different directions. I mean, he points out in his article, Illinois. Once Illinois got J.B. Pritzker, a good Democrat, as governor of Illinois, boom. I mean, they're moving forward. They have deemed abortion a fundamental right for women, no matter what the Supreme Court says. They have raised the minimum wage, or they're working to. They're taking steps to legalize recreational marijuana. They've introduced a graduated income tax. And I would say, hey, about time. What, they have a flat tax in Illinois? On the other hand, he points out in Alabama lawmakers voted to ban most abortions. They eliminated marriage licenses so that probate judges opposed to same-sex marriage wouldn't have to sign them. And they approved requiring sex offenders who commit crimes involving kids to undergo chemical castration at their own expense. And, again, Kay Ivey of Alabama earlier signed an abortion and marriage license bills. I mean, so we're seeing basically these very, very different directions that our states are going in as a consequence of these takeovers. And in fact, I would argue that the Republican takeovers, the state-by-state Republican takeovers, are really the pinnacle of the achievement of the Koch brothers with the American Legislative Exchange Council and these other groups that they have started. Numerous groups all have freedom in their name somewhere to, take over state government, state by state by state. And where you see the Democrats, surging back, it's where people have, for some time, as in Illinois, we had a Republican governor for a while and saw what was going on and said, we don't want that, thank you very much. We would like to have good infrastructure. We would like to have decent schools. Republicans don't want to have any of that. They don't want to pay for it because it would involve raising taxes on their donor class, which they're unwilling to do. And so, it's all about the money. So, and in fact, I would say that, probably the vast majority of this divide, at least the Republican end of this divide, is being driven by big money, which, comes out of the Supreme Court's Buckley decision in '76 and their Citizens United decision in 2010, among others. And I mean, corporate personhood going back to the 1880s, explicitly, and arguably going all the way back to 1815 or 1814 and the Dartmouth College case. So all of this, and so what the Republicans have done is, in efforts to keep their taxes low on their donor class, they're raising fees on all the rest of us. They're making it so that Democratic states, if you live in those states, you can't deduct your property taxes and things. You can't deduct your state income taxes more than $10,000. I mean, this is part of Trump's reform of taxes so that those states that actually have good public infrastructure, have good public education, they will have higher state taxes, of course, because you have to pay for these things. And it used to be that you could deduct your state taxes from your federal taxes. Now people in those states that have done good by their people are getting screwed by Donald Trump and the Republicans' tax scam, the GOP tax scam. And they're also working to reduce regulation, which is something that we call public protections, right? Regulations of poisons in the air, poisons in the water, the things that are carbon products, methane and carbon dioxide, that are destroying our atmosphere and possibly bringing out extinctions. Certainly bringing out animal extinctions. The human race itself could be facing extinction, or at least some very, very, very serious problems in short order. And And then you get, the Catholics and evangelicals, kind of getting into bed with each other. This happened right around the time that Reagan was elected. Prior to that, the evangelicals were in favor of a woman's right to choose an abortion. They decided to change that position and join the Catholics. And now this has become, part of the Republican coalition. They're drawing these people into their party. The NRA and guns, that's the Republican coalition. Bigotry in the form of opposition to gay marriage, and promoting so-called school choice so that they can keep schools white. And all this kind of stuff. The Republicans, because their agenda is entirely economic, they've only, they've had to cobble together these coalitions of other people who are like, out there, right? And so the big question is, as this all tears America apart, how do we bring this country together? Will our democracy survive this process? And adding, pouring gasoline on the flames, you've got right-wing hate radio in well over 1,000 towns across the United States. And you've got Fox News 24/7 pouring gasoline on these flames. The billionaire Rupert Murdoch, as Kevin Rudd, the former Prime Minister of Australia, wrote in an op-ed for the Sydney Morning Herald back about, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or so. I shared it with you on this program. He said, in fact, the title, the headline, was Rupert Murdoch is a cancer on the democracy of Australia. He owns over half the media in Australia. He flipped Australia to the right several times, and Australia now is really struggling with that. There's a big movement even to privatize their healthcare system coming out of these billionaires in Australia. One of the biggest political actors in Australia is a woman who is the richest person in the country. She owns a bunch of mining concessions, including coal mining. And so they're now Australia, the right-wing politicians, the Republicans of Australia, that's not the name of their party, but, their equivalent are trying to shoot down climate change. Why? Because they've got a big donor who's a fossil fuel billionaire, just like the Republicans in the United States taking money from Charles Koch, so, or through his organizations. So how do we survive this? How do we make it through? As long as these special interests, and make no bones about it, these are special interests. The fossil fuel industry, the fossil fuel companies, they make money poisoning us. When we burn gasoline in our cars, the exhaust that goes into the air causes cancers. We know this. The soot that goes into the air causes lung disease and COPD, the chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. We used to call it emphysema. All of this, or a lot of this stuff, and of course mining coal, black lung and things like that, whereas if we did like China's doing right now, or Norway is doing, Norway has said, hey, after next year, I believe it's next year, it might be the year after, you cannot sell a car in Norway, a new car in Norway, that has an internal combustion engine. Their goal is to have all of those cars just phased out entirely. More than half of all the cars right now in Norway are electric cars. And electric car technology is to the point, very successfully now, where typically electric cars will run 300 miles on a charge. And, that's a great long distance. And the chargers are getting faster, the batteries are getting better. It's really working. So there are all kinds of solutions here. But the Republicans in the United States and conservatives around the world, back to Kevin Rudd's op-ed, he said, Murdoch destroyed democracy in Australia. Then he moved to the United Kingdom, bought the Times of London, bought a bunch of tabloids, is trying to buy a television network there. I don't know if he's pulled it off or not, and poisoned the politics of England, flipping England to the hard right, Maggie Thatcher and all her heirs. And then he moved to the United States and flipped the United States hard right. And it seems to me, now this is just my opinion, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, but it seems to me that this money in politics, this media monopoly, these media monopolies essentially, where the owners of these large radio networks that have literally hundreds and hundreds of radio stations will tell you to your face, as one has told me to my face, actually two of them have told me to my face, no, I'm not going to put progressive programming on because you progressives want to raise my taxes. And, just right out front, right? And on Fox News, you've got, Murdoch just pouring this poison constantly, day after day, into the bloodstream of America, as he has done in the UK and as he has done in Australia, as the former Australian Prime Minister is, enthusiastically telling us. What do we do about this? And are we at risk of really just tearing this nation apart because of all this poison, and because the Republicans are, fundamentally have no interest in improving the general welfare? I mean, everybody says, oh, the enumerated powers of Congress, that's the only things they should do, right? Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Read it sometime. It opens by saying Congress can appropriate money for the general welfare. It closes by saying Congress can appropriate money for the general welfare. It lists, 8 or 10 or 11 or whatever it is, things that specifically they want Congress to do. But it's not a limit. It's not a limit. But for the Republicans, it is. They're saying, oh, no, you can't do anything more than that. That's it. And the coalition that they're pulling together of gun people and anti-abortion people or forced pregnancy people, and companies that don't want to be regulated, in particular the fossil fuel industry, and bigots, right, from anti-gay and trans bigots to racial bigots. That's their coalition. None of those groups have a positive agenda for this country. In every single case, what they're selling is fear and hate. So you've got an entire political party that is doing two things. Number one, shoveling as much money as they can from working class people up to the billionaires. Trump has got, a half a dozen billionaires in his cabinet, number one. And then number two, they're joining with people who are basically all about, hating other people, or trying to regulate, trying to control women and their bodies, trying to control, wanting to have, wanting everybody to be able to wear a gun on their hip. It's incredible.